Welcome to the Trailblazers podcast. We're your hosts, Tyler and Dave, and this year we're trying some new content. So Tyler and I want to talk about some of our experiences before and share some insights that can be helpful to you guys in, say, finding jobs, networking, internships, anything like that. So one of the things that we want to talk about today is finding your first internship, maybe as like a bachelor student, or just finding an internship as a bachelor student. So Tyler and I want to talk a little bit about maybe some of our top tips in order to land your first internship or land your next internship. So Tyler, based on your undergrad experience and like where you are in your career right now, maybe what's like one tip you can think about to share with current students about, say, like finding their first internship?
Yeah, definitely, Dave. So I think like for finding your first internship, it's going to be really important to leverage the network that you have because every single summer, every single co-op term, companies are going to get lots of applications, just cold applications for internships, and you should definitely do that. That's a good skill to develop. How can you create the best application possible to actually get picked up from just a cold application? But the majority of the time, I feel like where you're going to get the most opportunities with getting internships is through your network. So, and if you're in school, you may not think you have one, but you already do with like the professors in your faculty and things like that. So a really good place to start is the professors of your class, and you can go to them, figure because they all have industry connections as well. So even if you want to work maybe in a research lab as an intern, which is great to do, I think at the undergraduate level, that's a different type of experience. But remember, all your professors have industry contacts as well that may be able to help you get an internship, as well as students in higher grades. And there's your career development office that every faculty has as well. So I think you want to leverage the people you know in those positions to make connections for you. Because when you get a referral to something, your chances of actually landing that internship are a lot higher. So I would say really start thinking about the people in your network. Who do they know, and can they make an introduction for you? While at the same time developing that skill of doing cold applications, because it's also good to work on your personal pitch and kind of what you're bringing as added value to that company. So I would say that's a really good place to start. Dave, what would you say about that?
Yeah, for sure. And then one thing I'm going to add on to that too, Tyler, is one of the things I know you mentioned is kind of like utilizing your network, right? And so this is like one thing, say like Tyler and I are already, say like graduating bachelor's a few years ago and then graduating master's a couple of years ago, like we know really well because like we've had the experience outside of school. But just like sharing a little tidbit on my story is I remember my very first internship, I must have applied to like 20 or 30 jobs, Tyler. I literally got a single interview, one interview, and I like got the job interview, did it pretty well, and then I ended up getting the offer. But then after you get your first internship, because you can leverage your prior work experience, like it makes it so much easier afterwards. And so any other internships or say like outside of school after you had those experiences, it makes getting that next job easier. So what I'll say for this is probably my first tip is something like this is um, try, although it might seem uncomfortable to us at the very beginning, try to say do a couple things, and it's more in regards to networking. You can connect with the other students who are more senior to you or people who are like young professionals, say like Tyler and myself, who have already graduated and we've seen and we've done those things. And these people are generally, one, willing to give you referrals, or two, willing to introduce you to more people that they know to perhaps help you. And you'd be surprised how easy this could be. Like some things that I've done before on LinkedIn have just been like, hey, my name is David. I'm also a student at this university. I'm also in this program. I realized that you were here previously and now working in this company. Would you be willing to make 15 minutes to chat online or over a coffee to learn about your experiences, right? And then because you make the connection with them and you make the time, then they'll be willing to give you an introduction. And so I think kind of my point with this first tip is like, if you can basically still apply to positions like Tyler's suggesting, but then on the side, find some ways to do some natural networking and kind of grow your social circle, you'll find that more opportunities will come to find you afterwards, or you'll know of more additional opportunities because you're going and doing this thing like finding a social circle. And so it doesn't always just have to be LinkedIn. It can be some other things. It could be like meetup.com. Maybe you find some like hobby that you're passionate about and meet people through that can introduce you to, a job. Or it could be, like a club at school. Same thing. People in your club will know other people or know maybe some opportunities. So my and kind of summation of my first tip, it would be focus on the application, but also with the application, supplement time for the networking. I'm sure everybody's heard the it's not what you know, it's who you know. It does help a lot to know people who can help you out and vouch for you. So yeah, that would be my one of my first tips. Tyler, what do you think about that tip? And then what do you got in your mind for maybe the next tip?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. That's extremely important. And what I would say is, okay, so now, say you've made a connection, you're in a position where you can apply to a company, maybe you have a contact there in your network. Then when you go through that application process, or like Dave says, when you reach out to somebody and you get a meeting from LinkedIn or something like that, I would say that when you get that opportunity to talk to somebody, the approach you want to take is being really intrinsically curious about their work and their company, instead of coming in hot out of the gates and really trying to sell yourself and that, hey, I'd be really great for this job and stuff like that. Because you have to come in with a humble attitude and saying that, okay, I actually, I'm here to learn about what you do and about your company. And then what you want to do is show them that you're listening. Like if you're an active listener, people are always going to notice that. So what you can do is figure out a bit about their story, the story of their company, and then you can try to mesh that with some experiences you've had in the past. So, you talk to them after a few minutes, you get where they're coming from, and you say, oh, well, I've done this project in the past, and I think it really fits in well with, what you're doing here. And I'd like to learn more about this, what you do at the company, and just be curious about it. I think that's going to go a really long way. Trying to make an effort to learn about them rather than really sell yourself right off the start. The whole process will happen more naturally, and they'll be more inclined to, not only talk to you more, but maybe open a door for you for an opportunity in the future. So I would say that's the next one, is once you make that connection, through the way that David suggested, then have a little bit of patience and put some effort into really learning about that company. It's kind of analogous to the way you customize cover letters, right? Like if you're writing a cover letter for a company, you want to customize it as much as you can for that company. You don't want to use your cover letter that's just a formula that you've set out to 100 companies. The same thing when you're meeting somebody and asking about their company. You don't want to go into these meetings and give the same pitch to every single person, because then they're going to recognize that right away. You want to make an effort to understand who they are, what their role is, what the company does, and you want to kind of share the things or spin the experiences you've had to show them why you would be valuable at that company. So that's the next tip that I would give. And I even think that this would happen before the application process, because then somebody's going to hear that from you and they're going to say, okay, great, I'll refer you here. You make an application. So you're still in the process of, even before you submit your application, doing this is what I think. What would you say about that, Dave?
Yeah, for sure. I think I completely agree with you, Tyler. Like, I heard just a funny tidbit with this is I heard this one time, I forget who told me this, but they, in regards to what you're saying, basically asking a lot of questions, like when you are doing these informational interviews, and somebody told me one time, they're like, people love talking about themselves and like talking about like their own stories. So if you just ask them more questions, like they're gonna feel like you're like really interested in them and like their story, and they're gonna be like more willing to like share their knowledge with you, right? And then usually what happens out of that is like you might have not even shared like one bit of like why you'd be like a potentially good fit for the role or like a good fit for the company, but because you had like a good conversation with them, like that'll kind of stick in their minds. So it's kind of funny how these things work, but like it is a little bit of a hack to some extent, is just like asking relevant questions and like say like actually learning about like what you're curious about in the company too. So and then my final tip would be something like this. And I see professionals do this, I see students do this. So it doesn't just have to be for students, but when you're writing out your resume, feel free, especially if it's your first internship or your second internship or wherever you're at, spend definitely use any prior experiences you have. If that means you were delivering newspapers, it's cool. If that means you were cleaning tables at a restaurant, that's also good. If you were a server, great. Find some ways to quantify your work experience. I see like professionals even with like several years of work experience like giving me a resume to review, and there's literally not a single number on the resume of like how they quantified like any of their work responsibilities. And these are people who graduated for like 5 years. Like they could have, yeah. So basically, like I'll give you an example. Say if you were a paper delivering papers. So say you could do something like this. Like maybe like hypothetically there was like a manual delivery process. You could say automate it, and usually like having like an action verb at the beginning is like a great way to put it. If Tyler and I can, we'll put some resources and link some resources in the description of this video so you can see automated paper delivery process by utilizing a scooter. I don't know, we'll say electric scooter, increasing or increasing delivery speed by 35%. Like that sounds cool, right? And you can quantify like what you did and like what the outcome was, right? Or if it was like you're a server, you're like formulated new way to deliver goods as a team to increase customer satisfaction by 15%. Just something along these lines. And I know every recruiter that I talk to in industry now, they always love this. They love this when you can quantify your experience because it shows them that you know that there's like you're adding business value, right? Like if you're actually quantifying your experience, you're adding business value. And so it gets that higher level of abstraction to understand what you're doing and the impact it has on the business. You're not just doing something to do something, you're doing something to impact the business, right? And so if you as a student can do this and showcase that you understand this, when you go into an interview process, it looks really well because a hiring manager will look at your resume, they'll be like, okay, this person not only do they work do their work well, but they also understand what impact it has on the business. So if you can just do that little bit of work and basically put some quantification, and it doesn't have to be crazy. It could just be like, yeah, I delivered 500 dinners a night at X restaurant. Cool, quantification, right? And yeah, that's my second tip. Tyler, what do you think about that tip? And any final thoughts?
I think that that is a really good tip, and that's something that I tried to do in my resume as well. And then when I started doing it, I actually it makes you understand how much experience you have with some things that you wouldn't have thought of before. Like when I started quantifying the things that I've done, like members of team members led on a certain project, or however many times I did this certain activity over here and stuff like that. When I wrote it down, I was like, oh, damn, I've actually done that quite a bit, and it gives you like some more confidence going into that interview because you feel like you know it a little bit, pretty well. So yeah, I think it's a really good tip. Like you say, there's a huge difference between, like you're saying, doing something 500 times and one time. There's obviously a huge difference between that candidate. And so the idea you want to have at the end of the day is, how is my resume going to separate myself from the rest of the pack, right? Like if I've done something, if I can quantify something that I've done much more, or much more effectively, or in a certain way that's different from everybody else, I have to really make sure that's highlighted well on my resume, because that's what's going to get me the interview. So I definitely agree with that. And that's exactly what recruiters are going to be looking for. It always looks better if you have that number on there and if you put some effort into quantifying what you're doing. So I think that's good for getting the interview. But then when you get into the interview, I feel like it's a bit more story driven there. Humans are very story driven. So you want to kind of attach that number to, an experience and something they can understand through a story. But that is not the subject of this short clip. Maybe we'll do a one on interviews in the future. So just to wrap things up, those were 3 really great tips. Hopefully that can help everyone apply for internships and get jobs. And if you're wondering more about it, don't be afraid to comment. Let us know what you think. And yeah, hopefully that helps.
Yep. Thanks, guys. As always, give us a like and subscribe, and more useful content coming your way soon. Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Have a good one.